Once again, welcome to the only place playing it harder, faster, and louder than anybody else. It is Metal for the Masses on live365.com. And I am not just joined, I am blessed by the presence of Iron Kingdom's lead guitarist and vocalist, Chris Osterman. I am pronouncing that correctly, sir.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today.
Absolutely. It is my pleasure. The pleasure is all mine. Sir, you guys have an amazing album coming out, and I was given the prestigious honor to review this album, to listen to it before it's released, and kind of, not to make a joke about it, but to bathe in its glory. It's called The Blood of Creation. And I'm kind of blown away because I have listened to you guys in the past, and this sound on this album particular is so much more evolved than anything else I have heard from you guys in the past. I've listened to your album On the Hunt, which fantastic album. That's how I got introduced to your band. Went back, started listening to your earlier stuff. Curse of the Voodoo Queen, Ride for Glory, Gates of Eternity. You know, you guys have been around for a while, and it's amazing to me that, you guys, and I mean this I don't mean this in a mean way at all when I say this, but it shocks me that you guys are not at a higher level, on the spectrum. It blows my mind. Because you guys, the talent's there. You guys are absolutely fucking amazing. It's just incredible to me.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. A lot of people do say that, but I find it's kind of like people either love it or they don't get it, almost.
Yeah.
At least that's maybe my experience. But then it's also like we are an unsigned band.
Yeah.
So, we're doing it all ourselves. Like The Blood of Creation, On the Hunt, we actually recorded those ourselves too. So, it's very much a DIY kind of band, and everything we do is paid for from the work that we do within the band. So it's work of art. It's art that we love. You know what I mean? Like it's
as it should be. Anybody going into this line of work for, to become a millionaire is going about it all wrong, man. There's a reason why, they call them starving artists. Nobody calls them, rich and successful artists. That's the few and far between. There's always some suffering and some pain that goes into doing art, but it's never like to become a millionaire. It would be nice, but at the same time, it's for the art at the end of the day. So you're hitting it right on the head there, and being a DIY band, you guys really, for being a DIY band, and I'm going to say this again, sound amazing. The sound is absolutely incredible. Like I did some digging, went on your website, listened to you guys have a Blood of Creation, kind of part 1 biography kind of thing up on YouTube. I've been listening to that.
Oh, cool.
And your other lead guitarist said that this is like a more mature kind of sound for you guys, and you guys are also working with a brand new drummer, and there's so much new going around with this album. Like even the artwork, I was listening to it. This is like a darker, not anything like the kind of art that you guys have done in the past. And even looking at your previous albums, it is much darker. It is, a little bit more over the top than previous album covers prior. It's everything about this, The Blood of Creation, even the sound, it's all new. It sounds like you guys have really started coming into your own, finding what works, and you guys are just taking it to the next level. I mean, like, what do you can you go into all of that a little bit? I know I'm kind of all over the place.
Yeah. Well, I'll try and start from the beginning. So there's a couple cool things about this record. So you had mentioned Megan, our other guitar player. One of the cool things is that on this record in particular, she was there from the beginning of the creation of this one. Whereas with On the Hunt, she came in kind of part way. We had already written, I mean, give or take, at least half the album. So when she joined, she kind of learned half the album and then helped us write the other half, and then just kind of threw in some ideas of how things could improve. But when it came to this album, it was she's there from the beginning. So that's one important thing to take note of. Another thing as well is Max Friesen, our new drummer. He joined in 2020, so it was literally like COVID hit, everything shut down. He comes back from Japan. He was teaching English in Japan, so he obviously he came back home because of COVID, and then he goes, all right, well, I need something new. So he's like, maybe I should look for another band because I used to play in the past, right? So we were looking for a drummer because our guy just bailed, and then along comes Max, and he's basically like a modern day Neil Peart, you know, and it's crazy. Like if you really pay attention to the record and you really listen just the drums alone, there's stuff you're like, whoa, what did he just do there? You know, like, and it's really cool, and I love it about what he was able to do on that, and also a really cool thing that he added too was, you know, he got more involved in the production side of things too, and he can actually sing too, which is really cool. So when it comes to our live show, we're gonna have four parts happening at times where all four of us are singing. So really, as a band, like a lot has changed in that kind of regard. Um, and then I guess if we were to go, you'd mentioned a couple other things in there. I'm trying to remember what exactly, but yeah, with the cover, like I remember we worked with the same artist, right? So it's the same
Right.
guy who did Ride for Glory. He also did On the Hunt, and the artwork, like he sent it to us the first idea when we gave him the title The Blood of Creation, and we told him it was about Marduk and Tiamat and the ancient Sumerian creation story there. And once he heard that, he came back with this cover, and we're just like, there's this severed dragon head, and it's dripping blood all over the god. I believe it's Enki, and and in the background he's creating the universes, and underneath he's creating the earth and mankind and all this stuff. And it's just like I don't know how he was able to put that all into one image, but when we saw it at first, we were just like, "There's no way we could do this." Then we're like, "Wait a minute."
It's like,
You know,
you know what? We shouldn't even say no to this. This is the cover now. Like
oh yeah, like it, like in within a day or so, we were all just like, "No, that's totally the cover." Like we just didn't even realize how dark like the product that we had just created was at that point. And we wrote it all during COVID too, so you
right.
know, we were all kind of just feeling bummed out as everyone was, you know. And
Absolutely.
all we wanted to do was play a show or go on tour or do something, go to a show, see a band play, like anything. And we were like, we can't. So we're like, well, I guess we can jam. I guess we can write music. That's about all
And
we can do.
and you guys really did write music here. And I want to go and just you're the vocalist of this band, sir. And I would just like to ask, how do you hit such Biff Buford, uh Bruce Dickinson heights of vocal note? Like, how do you do this? Like I sat and I listened to this, all of your songs, like all of the tracks off of this album, and
Yeah,
it's just I'm blown away by the heights that you can reach, because I immediately, you know, I think Iron Maiden, I think Judas Priest, I think Saxon, like, these are all vibes that I'm getting all throughout this album. But it's just like, it's not just that, it's your own sound,
right.
you guys have culminated this sound and it is yours, but it brings to mind these great bands, which is why I'm saying, for a DIY style band, for a band that is doing all of this yourself, you're unsigned, it blows my mind, man. Like, you guys are just, it's talent beyond any that, beyond any that I can bring to mind, at this given time. And it brings back, thoughts of these great bands, like these sounds that I want to say that the modern scene kind of calls like old and tired, you know? And I think that that's why a lot of like these newer bands, they go more for like the growly and like the I
Right.
call them the unclean vocal styles.
Sure.
But you guys are clean all the way through this album. There's no growls, there's no anything. You guys are clean vocal all the way through, which, is something that's amazing. But you're also hitting these Mount Everest level heights of notes that I can't even I can't even try, on my best of days to ever reach. What goes into that? Is that natural, or do you have to like really
Oh,
like train yourself in order to hit these notes?
well, why don't I take you back a little bit here? So, when we originally started the band, like we're talking even before we were called Iron Kingdom, we used to just do instrumental stuff, and we
Gotcha.
didn't have a singer, and we were like, I don't know who's gonna sing. I don't know. I can't find Ian Gillian, so I don't know who's gonna sing. And or Bruce Dickinson or whoever. Like we can't. Where are we gonna find that guy, right? And so we were like, okay, well, we went through this rotation door of like a bunch of people who they sang okay, I guess, but a couple of them were tone deaf, a couple of them, whatever. And then eventually it was just like, well, can any of us sing? Like, what, everybody give it a shot. And we went through every person who was in the band at the time. Everybody tried to sing, and they looked at me and they're like, "You got to be the guy." And I was just like, "No, I don't want to be. I don't want to be the singer." I was like, "No, no, 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 no. I'm a guitar player, dude. No, no, no." And then they're
I
like,
got the long hair. I got the cut off sleeves. I'm the guitar guy. Like I'm not the
"Yeah,
singing guy.
yeah." And then after a few shows and stuff, it was just like, I have to do this. I totally have to do this. And I was really bummed out, to be honest, at first. And then very shortly later, like after a few gigs and things started looking more fun and whatever, I was like, I realized how much I actually enjoyed singing as well. And it was around this time when I had realized that I needed to do this for the group in order for us to do anything. Then I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna need to get some lessons because I heard some horror stories of some friends who developed polyps, and there goes their voice. They're getting neck surgery, like throat surgery and stuff, and it's just a nightmare. And like I know this happens not just with clean singing. This happens with growly. This happens with everything.
It very much with growly. Like you got it. There's any like one, I've never heard of anybody be so bummed out and humble about wanting to be the front man of any band. That's great. But two, yeah, with vocal style, any kind of vocal stuff, for an ex-choir kid right here, there's so much that
Yeah,
goes into it that you wouldn't know, that the normal person just like, I'll get in and I'll start, singing.
yeah,
I've done some karaoke in my day, like, I'll just get in, I'll start doing it. It's like, no, like there's an art to this.
there,
You could develop nodes, you could throw your voice, you could damage your voice, you could permanently
yeah.
damage your voice. Like there's so much that that it's
Well,
not just like playing instrument is an art, singing is an art.
well, and it's funny because like you'd think, oh well, I can just sing along to the album in my car, and that's the same as anything else. And I mean, I guess if you're trained, you could kind of warm yourself up that way, probably, as long as you know what you're doing. But it's a dangerous art. I mean, I guess you can look at playing guitar or you can look at drumming, and there's also ways you can hurt yourself there too. Like I think Megan's got some kind of minor tendonitis going on, and Max has, I think, tendonitis going on in both hands. And it's just like one of those things where it's like you do this for so long and it's so repetitive, and you know there's so many ways to hurt ourselves doing it, and it
Yeah.
doesn't look like it, doesn't seem like it, but there really are. um, but yeah, as a vocalist though, my biggest goal was, how do I do this so I don't hurt myself? You know, I think I had a relatively good ear when it came to pitch, so I didn't really have to work too much on that part, and I already knew what I wanted to do. Like Ian Gillan was one of my heroes from Deep Purple, and Rob Halford, and Bruce Dickinson, and then I heard bands like Crimson Glory from New Jersey, and like just blew me away with what they could do, and I'm still reaching for things. I'm still like, I'm not good enough. I need to be, I need to be there, not where I am.
On the next album, you'll be at like death level of vocal styles. Just keep pushing that ceiling, brother.
Yeah, well, and that's just it. Is it's like anything. Like you had mentioned, we have 5 records out at this point, and if you kind of pay attention to each one, you'll notice that there were slight modifications between each album. And it's not just how we wrote the album. That is kind of a weird thing about Iron Kingdom, is that every album kind of sounds different because we wrote it differently, which is kind of one aspect that I think is kind of neat. But another thing, though, is if you look at these albums, each time we look at the production and we go, how could we do this better? Or, just anything. How could we record this better? How could we, the gear we're using, anything. And we're just constantly improving it. And On the Hunt is a kind of unique one, though, because we went from going to professional studios with an engineer and they dealt with everything, to we did everything on our own.
Yeah.
So we bought all the mics. We bought, the recording interfaces. Actually, a little side note story thing. It's kind of neat, but our original interface that we still use today was actually donated to us because we played a gig in Ohio and the promoter bailed on the show. Like there was no promotions done at all. We got paid nothing. We actually owed the venue money.
Damn.
And the whole thing went to shit. And this actually,
listen, dude, we're not FCC regulated, sir. You can say whatever the fuck you want. It's okay.
Okay, awesome. And so actually a radio DJ like yourself was at the show, and somehow he heard about the show. There's only maybe like 10, 15 people there. And he comes up to us at the end of the show and he goes, look, guys, I feel terrible about how this went. I have this interface, an 8-channel interface, and I don't use it because all I do is radio stuff, and I only need, I think he said 2 or 3 channels. So he had another unit that was much smaller, and he's like, this is all I want. And he goes, so look, I don't have a use for this. Why don't you guys take this and maybe you'll have more use out of it than I did. And like, it was very hard to accept this offer because we're sitting there like, no, dude, there's no way you can give us this thing. And he's like, no, I absolutely have no use. Please take it. And so we did. And he's like, I want you to think better of Ohio than your experience today. And I was like,
you to think better of Ohio. Take this interface from me, please.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It really did, though, and so that was one of the coolest things that anybody's ever done for us. Like it was just crazy. Like, where did that come from? And we actually could use it, and that was the craziest part. And we used it on this album. We used it on the Hunt.
Oh, that's awesome. Did you reach it? Did you ever like reach back out to this person, or like somewhere in the small print or like in the art book, like dedicated to Ohio, like this album?
I really should have.
Oh my God. Just in the little like track booklet, just dedicated to Ohio.
Maybe the next one. That's a good point.
That's all. Just have a track named Ohio on the next album.
This one's about a recording interface.
Right. That's awesome. That's wow. I've never had a promoter just completely bail like that, or have heard of a promoter bailing like that, but I'm sure you guys are not the only one that have ever experienced that. That sucks. Going back to the album, The Blood of Creation. We talked about the artwork. It is, it's darker and just way different than like anything else. Like, I want to say that I think the only thing that like kind of comes close to it is Ride for Glory. Like Ride for Glory kind of gets sort of like has like those darker tones, like those darker shades.
Right.
um, on the album artwork, but like the Blood of Creation just goes way farther than that, and just that's I'm still blown away. It's like holding a dragon just above his head, letting it bleed down, and just all that stuff. Like your description of it and what it's about, that's cool. It really just I enjoy stuff that tells a story, and
Yeah.
you really get that, you know, from the intro, from the the crashing waves and the almost Viking like chants, and then going into all of the the dueling guitars and everything else along this entire album, to the 13 some odd minute ballad at the end, the Blood of Creation, which just you know you talked earlier about how like every album has a different sound, like sounds different. And I was reading like on your band's bio on your webpage. You guys are influenced by bands like Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, these very big 80s hair metal powerhouses and heavy metal powerhouses, Iron Maiden in particular. Every album that Iron Maiden has ever come out with has never sounded like any other album they've released before. And every album in its own way tells a story. And it's not also just because Iron Maiden is my favorite band of all time, but I'm just going to say I like that aspect, and that I can hear that influence, throughout this entire album. I can hear the Judas Priest. I can hear your influences, but it does not define the sound.
That's
You
right.
know, that's what I enjoy, because too many times I can go back and I can listen to an album, I can listen to a band, and they can say we're influenced by XYZ. And then you go and you listen to their song, it's like, yeah, but it sounds like you were just trying to imitate them all the way through. And is while that's fine for like a band where it's like this may be like their first album and
Mhm.
this is a learning process and going on, you know, even from album one, you guys have your sound and you guys are constantly improving your sound. You're not staying stagnant all the way through, and you're changing the sounds, and every sound defines an album. Like you can go back, you can listen to, uh, you know, like I just said, Ride for Glory or On the Hunt, and you can be like, that's that song, that's this track, that's from this album because this is that
Yeah.
sound.
Yeah.
Or like that's Queen of the Crystal Throne because that's from Blood of Creation, because it has this solo and it has this sound from it's like it's awesome. It's definitely a I actually reviewed your album and I put this in the review. Instead of just writing songs, giving them titles, throwing them together and giving it just this cool snazzy title, Blood of Creation, like, you guys are actually, you're writing a story from start to finish. You guys are writing a story. And
Mhm.
that is something that just does not happen in a lot of albums today. Not a lot of albums tell a story. A lot of albums, and not just from, metal bands, but just other bands in general, don't have this narrative all the way through, don't feel like they're connected in any way, but every track, every note, every dueling guitar, every drum beat, every bass line, every vocal note is all intertwined and connected on this album, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of that has to do with when we get into recording, it's kind of like, it's almost like a shift in mindset. It's like, all right, let's do it again, but let's be as creative as we can be and
Yeah.
fresh and new and something different. We never, like, every now and again you'll hear a song that's like maybe there's some similarities to something we might have done. Like, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the albums, but if you were to say look at Queen of the Crystal Throne and then you listen to Raise and Ruin from On the Hunt, there's like some similarities you can kind of see. But the funniest thing is that Queen of the Crystal Throne was mostly my riffs, and Raise and Ruin was mostly Megan's riffs. So it's really weird. Like we don't, I don't know. We work as a team and we jam it out and everything. But every now and again we won't copy anything or repeat anything, but we'll kind of take some concepts and almost like an overall thing of maybe a song somewhere, and
Right.
but you know, for me, one of the coolest things was because I'm also super influenced by like the Scorpions and Rush as well, and stuff like that. And if you listen to those bands, like you had mentioned about Iron Maiden, it's like the albums don't necessarily sound the same. Like don't get me wrong, I do love bands like Hammerfall, where every album is pretty much the same thing. But I also love bands like the Scorpions, where it's like you have Animal Magnetism, which is like kind of just like a heavy metal album, and then you have something else like I don't know, you go back to the early stuff like Tokyo Tapes or something, and it's
Yep.
not even close. Like
Nothing.
it sounds like a totally different band. And if you look at Blood of Creation compared to Curse of the Voodoo Queen, like how is that even the same band? I don't know. And the funniest thing is, well, we had a pre-order recently, and they bought literally the Blood of Creation and Curse of the Voodoo Queen, and I was like, this is going to be interesting. I'm curious how this guy feels about these two, because there's no middle ground there to see how that progressed. It kind of reminds me of when I bought British Steel and Painkiller on the same day by Judas Priest, and you're sitting there with Painkiller, this like heavy, like everything is crazy,
Right.
and then you listen to British Steel and fantastic songwriting, but this is no Painkiller,
Well, right. It's like listening to oh man, it's like listening to Brave New World and then trying to go back and compare that to The Number of the Beast. It's like,
Yeah,
this is the same band. Like, what the like? How's
yeah,
this happen?
totally. They're just very, very like different albums, and I find that it's a very creative path to go that way, where it's not quite the same, and it's risky as hell. It's so risky.
I was about to interject. It's a huge risk to take, but you guys are in a great situation because, like you said at the beginning, it's like you guys are doing this for the art, man. This is your baby. You don't have anybody behind you telling you, look, this is how we want you to do it. This is how you need to do. This is how we think you should do it. It's like, no, like this is Iron Kingdom, and however, like and it's not a one-man show. Obviously, you
Mhm.
all get together, brainstorm. What are we going to do? Like you've said multiple times at the interview, you jam it out, and whatever comes out of jamming it out, man. Like that's it. And then you can tweak it and make it your own and try to find out what works. I mean, obviously it's very rare that the first time through you guys make the perfect song,
Mhm.
but like you said, you jam it out, you see what works, and there you go.
Exactly. Yeah, and like the writing process for us is just always super fun. It's like new ideas. We're just super open to what it's going to be, and we never really know where it will go. And I think it just keeps it really fun and exciting for us, because when we put something out that's new, it's like, this is fresh,
Yeah.
something new, and then people kind of go like, oh, you know I was hoping it would be kind of like this or whatever, but this is sick. Or and sometimes it's you get a few elitists who will be like, oh, it's not Gates of Fraternity, so
Right.
and it's just like, well, we're never gonna do Gates of Fraternity again, because as much as there's probably a few people who wish we did, it's that's not how this works for us. So
There's so many people that I don't know. I sit and I talk about this on my show all the time. It's like, you can't please everybody. And metal is not as much of an inclusive genre as metal is. It's got many subgenres. It's got so much for everybody to enjoy.
yeah.
There's still those where it's just like any band, you can just yourselves, for instance, you were saying any band. Oh, this album doesn't sound like the last album that came out. It's like, well, then, dude, go back and listen to the last album. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not like we're not just going to come out every 2, 3, 4, 5 years with the same thing every single time. That's just, what's the point of going into the studio at that point?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, here's the remixed version of this album where we just added this, and that's it. It's just there's so many people that I don't think they get that. It's just like, it's writing music, doing music in general is not just about re-releasing the same thing every single time. And it's not about just pleasing everybody. You guys at the end of the day are artists. You're going to write what you want to write. You're going to have fans that for whatever reason come and go, and they're going to like albums that they like. They're going to, you're not going to release an album that just pleases everybody. I've yet to see a band release an album that everybody can collectively say, this is it. Look at fucking Metallica. Look at it. Look at Metallica and Megadeth fans. Like, oh, that's a battle that's never going to end.
Yeah.
But we've talked so much. Yeah. If you're fans of both, oh God, I don't know what you are.
It's like multiple personalities.
That's split personality disorder at that point. You're fighting with yourself. But we've talked a lot about your music. I want to talk about your lyrics. I want to talk about the writing process of all of that. Who's behind that, and what's the process of that? Like, how do you sit down and write all these songs and come up with these titles?
Well, okay, so when it comes to lyrics, it's a little bit interesting because our bassist Leighton, he actually writes the majority of the lyrics. But when I say majority, it's it always varies. Because I usually write one or two myself. Every now and again, somebody else will come in with at least an idea, if not a rough, thing. Like Megan came in one time and she had like some lyric ideas, and then we kind of like revamped it from what she had, to fit it in with kind of how we write our lyrics as well. And it's interesting because if there's a cool idea and we're into it, that's what we do. It's sometimes it'll be easier to get ideas when we sort of theme an album in a way. Like sometimes we'll roughly theme it. Like Gates of Eternity was about death, life. It was about heaven and hell, stuff like that. And so it's very dichotomies, like lots of that kind of stuff going on. So it was kind of easy to find topics, and it was just like, well, we're going to talk about what if you lived forever, and you just watch everyone around you die. That's what Chains of Solitude is about, for example, on Gates of Eternity. But if you look at Blood of Creation, we actually took a lot from, it was kind of like, arguably you could say people suffering in a way. Like there's a lot of topics about like suffering. Hunter and Prey is about the Finnish sniper who killed 500 people on his own, and he gets shot in the face and he survives, and it's crazy. Like, and then you've got Sheathe the Sword, which is about a fictional character, Lan from The Wheel of Time, and without giving anything away, there's a sword move where essentially you sheathe your enemy's sword into you in order to kill him.
Yeah.
So it's like your last chance at,
I'm going to stab myself in order to take you with me.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, the ultimate sacrifice. And then you've got like, the whole thing, there's like this kind of dark theme going on. And, with the Blood of Creation, there's like all these gods being killed and stuff. And it's just craziness. And then, the actual creation is through death and like blood. And it's crazy.
Am I allowed to talk about the somberness at the end of all of that, at the end of that 13-minute song, The Blood of Creation?
Yeah.
It's so, from how it starts to how the whole album goes to the end of the ballad, The Blood of Creation, that the little acoustic somberness at the end, I actually was taken aback by when I was listening. I was just like, oh, this is kind of out of, like, I don't want to say it's out of nowhere, but it was just kind of like, I wasn't expecting it. Like I wasn't expecting it to just be like, and now here's this soft, somber acousticness, everybody's dead, and now here's the nice.
It's like the reforming of everything. Yeah, that was an interesting one because I'd actually written that song on my own. Like that little acoustic thing was a full song that I wrote a few years ago when there was actually a moment where it was just Leighton and myself in the band, and we lost our drummer, we lost our guitar player. For about a year, we did nothing.
Yeah.
This is 2017, and I wrote that from a personal experience that I had gone through in that year, and it was pretty much I wrote it for myself, and didn't share it with anybody, didn't share it with the band, nobody. And we got to this song, and I was just like, I think this suits this ending. Like I think like I was okay with how it ended, but it felt like it was missing something.
Right.
And I was just like, what if we added this? And I showed the group, and they're like, well, you know, like they didn't know what to think exactly. And it's kind of like what you were saying.
Yeah.
But what I think is so cool about it is we don't necessarily write the songs just to be a song.
Right.
It's also part of the album. It's part of the whole. And not only does it kind of have this weird sort of somber end to it, that like it kind of tells the story of the whole album in a way by doing this as well. But it also wraps the album really nicely. If you listen to it end and then begin again, you're just like, this is flawless.
Right. It because of how it ends, and because of obviously the intro of the album, it is very just, you know, the way it is. It can just be repeated over and over again. It doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like it necessarily has an end. It just feels like, as you said, it's this endless loop. You know, it's this endless loop of just a lot of people dying, and then it's and it's somber again, and then there's a lot of people dying again, and then it's really somber, and then just this endless loop of that.
Yeah. So exactly. There's a few reasons why we did it. And another cool thing here, like, and maybe you'll see this after this interview, but if you listen to the album Heaven and Hell by Black Sabbath, right at the end there, they go into this weird classical like acoustic thing, and you're just like, what? You know, and I always loved it.
Absolutely.
I love that they did it.
Ronnie James Dio, Geezer Butler, and
Tony Iommi.
Tony Iommi. Yep, I always forget his name for some reason.
Yeah, that's okay.
But they're geniuses, man. Absolute geniuses.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Just a lot of people want to say that, like, you know, the Ozzy years were the best, or the Dio years were the best, or just, and it's just like Black Sabbath as a whole, you know, we want to talk about albums just not sounding like each other too, and just being masterpieces, and just all this crazy stuff going on in every single album. You know, there's so much that goes on, not just in your albums, but in every band's album. There's so many different ways to make something good that, like, a lot of people are myself for instance, are taken aback from, like, the first time they go through it. They're like, that's a weird choice. Why would they decide to do that? But as you listen to it, like, I listened to your album before writing my review of it, like at least 3 times through. You know, I didn't, my first initial time through, you know, you have that, oh my God, this is amazing kind of thing. But it's like, well, I could sit now and write a review on this, and write this review completely in, you know, this, I just listened to an album high, or I could like, I don't know how else to describe it. It's like, I just listened to this album high kind of mood, or I could listen to it again and maybe hear stuff that maybe I didn't hear before, or try to wrap my mind around things that maybe at first threw me off. And I'm not going to lie, the first time through, I was very much like, why is this here? You know, at the, it was like, why did why is this here? Like I almost was going to put that in the review. It's like, out of everything, I don't know why they did this. But then, like, as I listened to it more, I was like, you know what? I know why they did this. You know, I get why this is here. This starts to fit. The more you listen to it, the more you're like, this fits, much like the end of Heaven and Hell.
Right.
The more you listen to it, the more you are less taken aback by it, the more you accept that it's there, and the more you start to realize this works. This fits.
Yeah.
This was always a part of it, you know?
Exactly.
It doesn't
And you nailed it right on the head. Like that's exactly what it was. And it was even took us aback when we did it. We were kind of like, is this right? But like, it's also the way it was mixed too, that I find makes it work, because it's so buried. It's like, you almost have to turn your stereo up just to even notice that it's there. And then, but that's also what I liked about it so much, was it was just like, it's all done. And now this is almost like a chance for you to like compose your feelings. It's like,
Right.
you know, it's just like, okay, now just like contemplate what you just heard for this next minute.
Now go sit in silence and
Yeah,
think
it's
about
like,
what you just heard.
yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what it does. It's like, it's just like, there's this thing at the end and you're just like, wow, I need to like contemplate what I just went through, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. It's kind of weird, but it's cool. I don't know.
Oh, it's not kind of weird. It is cool. You know, it's from start to finish, man. I don't know. I don't want to say this, and I always tell people I'm just some prick on the internet. So, you know, my opinion matters. My opinion matters very, very little. But, you know, I loved this album. You know, I'm into metal mainly because of my dad. My dad showed me Iron Maiden when I was really young. So like when I was going through like middle school and high school in the mid 2000s, when everybody was listening to bands like My Chemical Romance and shit, I was the weird guy sitting in the back listening to like Iron Maiden, Metallica, Black Sabbath, that kind of stuff, while everybody else is listening to, you know, My Chemical Romance and Paramore and you know, Black Veil Brides and all this other kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
I'm just this guy over here.
Yeah.
But you know, my dad got me into these kind of stuff. And when I listened to this album, I was like, I don't know, I felt like a kid. I got to show this to my dad. You know, it's like one of those kind of things. And I was like, I got something that you got to hear. I put it down, and let me see, what was the track that I showed him? Because it's just, we were literally in my kitchen just jamming, and it was In the Grip of Nightmares. We were jamming to this track. The dueling guitar section of that song is just a work of art. Like I'm sitting here going like, this is awesome. And it's hard to kind of like show my dad new modern metal bands these days, because a lot of them he's not really a fan of like the growly vocal style. And whenever he calls it Cookie Monster metal.
Yeah.
He's not really a big fan of the Cookie Monster metal, but I was sitting here, it's like, don't they like, he's like, these guys sound like all of my favorite bands in one band.
That's so sick.
It was so funny, because he's just like, these guys sounds like all of my favorite bands in one band. And it's awesome. But it's just like, I was like, you know what? They kind of do. They sound like everybody's like favorite, like 80s hair metal, you know, heavy metal band as one thing, you know, and it's just Iron Kingdom.
Yeah.
But I think he was kind of on point, you know, even all the old heads can kind of come back into the metal scene again and be like, hey, this is an awesome sound. But
yeah, well, just to comment on that, when you mentioned that you were the kid in the corner of the room listening to Dio and, you know, Sabbath and whoever, like, and you're like, nobody gets this kind of thing. That was me. That was, you know, that was literally what all four of us were when we were kids, was nobody got it. You know,
Right.
it was like, we're just sitting there like, I'm listening to Ride the Lightning on the school bus going, like, none of you fuckers get how cool this is right now.
Right. You're sitting here listening to Ride the Lightning, and everybody up at the other bus is like, why is that kid in a black trench coat? Why is that long hair? Why is it?
You know, I'm having a hard time not moving. Like,
Right.
You know,
This is great. This is
listen to
really
that
great.
ride. You know, yeah,
Right.
come on, man. You know, and it's just like nobody gets it. And
Right.
you know, it got to a point for I think pretty much each one of us individually went, you know, like this doesn't exist today. Like how can it doesn't exist? We're going to make it because like I wasn't done with it, you know, like
Nah.
I wanted
It,
more, you know.
somewhere along the line, and I don't think it's like, I don't think it was exactly this way, but somewhere along the line, this sound was deemed, old, you
Yeah.
know, somewhere along the line, a body of people were like, this is music this is a sound that is old, and they attribute this sound to their parents,
Yeah.
or if they're really, young enough, they attribute it to their grandparents. I have no idea.
I guess
But
by the answer.
if they're really that, that active. But it's not like how I was saying earlier, where metal really just has a subgenre for everybody. It's got so many different subgenres. It's not an old sound at all. While it's a sound that, yes, it's been around, it was very prominent in the 80s. It's still very big today. It's evolved since then. Metal is a genre that continuously evolves. And I think if anybody wants to look at any kind of sound and be like, this is old, you're looking at metal very narrow vision, very with a very narrow view on what music is and what sound is, and what it truly means uh to have, the genre kind of evolve. If that's the way we look at things, then, holy shit, like bands like Korn, bands uh Slipknot, like even bands like Death, and just that kind of a sound, that sound's going to be deemed old, and I don't know, how many years by the
Yeah.
next generation, and they'll have their whatever sound they deem is cool. But what's really awesome about this is I wish I could find more bands that had this kind of sound, that aren't just ripping off, bands of the past, or don't sound like a cover band, or don't sound like a weird, you know our band's called The Number of the Beast. Oh wow, I wonder what these guys are going to be about,
Right. Right.
like that kind of stuff. um I just don't know. I just think along the way there was this idea that this was an old sound, and so people wanted to move towards what was deemed cool at the
Mhm.
time, and now the thing that's super big. I think I interview more bands that actually utilize growls than I think anything else. It's a very prominent vocal style, and it's not bad. It takes talent to do that kind of stuff.
Of
You
course.
know, I can't sit here and just go for, to save my life. I think do I way more damage than I ever could to myself just to get one note out of it. But
Yeah.
hearing a band that has this sound, the sound of Iron Kingdom, and it's like, this is a this is a modern band releasing a modern album. This isn't like a bunch of, 50, 60-year olds, going on tour to relive a glory day. No, it's like, this is a new band. This is
Yeah.
this is a newer band.
Right.
You guys have been around for a little bit. You've released, this is your fifth album,
That's correct. Yeah.
and but this is a modern band releasing a sound that is all of these other sounds that I love, that not just myself, but other people my age and even people older than me like. It's something that I think metal needs to try to do a little bit better.
Mhm.
Metal has and I'm not saying this is a bad thing either, because I don't want us to become the heavy Swifties by any means,
Right.
because like pop has a big following because pop appeals to a lot of people, but pop is also very shallow and hollow and terrible. There's a lot of like, I don't know how many, I don't know how people can go to a Taylor Swift concert and be like, look, she dated for like 2 weeks and now this is a new album came out. What could it be about? You
Mhm.
know, like I'm not, I've always looked at pop like that, and I don't want metal to be that way. And I'm always like, we have to protect ourselves from the Swifties. We have to protect ourselves from, hollowing ourselves out for the sake of becoming accepted by the mainstream. But we also have to find a way to kind of battle the stigmatisms that I think metal gets from people. It's like, oh, metal's scary music. Because what do people think of when they think, non-metalheads think of when they think of metal? They think of the growly vocals, and that, you know,
Yep.
sets people off. It's like, if some people thought more like Iron King, it's like, oh, like, that actually sounds kind of nice. It's not too bad. It's not off-putting. It's not like, very you know, way over to the extreme side of the aisle.
Yeah.
I think more people would kind of see that metal isn't scary music. Metal actually is very diverse. It's actually very, very deep, and it actually, there's more to it. There's more than meets the eye when it comes to heavy
Yeah.
metal.
Well, and I agree with you completely. It's one of those things where like I'm really happy that we have so many subgenres. I actually find that, at least to me, metal is probably the most diverse genre on earth, because we don't stick to any one thing. It's like one guy's like, "Hey, I like what you did, but I want to play it faster." Now we have speed metal. You
Right.
know, I like what you did, but I want it to be grittier. Now it's thrash.
I like what you did, but I want to smoke weed the entire time. We got
Yeah, now
stoner
it's
metal.
weird. Yeah, exactly. And it's like every time, there's like these little niche market things within it, and I think it's really cool because, like a person like myself, like I'll jump into maybe 5, 6, 7 of those subgenres, and I'm enjoying each one of them for different reasons. And so like I like that we have all these, black metal and death metal and all this stuff, because it shows that there's so much diversity within the genre. But you're absolutely right, because I think the mainstream media took metal and they really like what we do, they turned it into what people call hair metal or glam metal, and they think that that's what we're doing. And we're like, no, that's not what we're doing. We're doing what influenced those bands. Like
Right.
we're before those bands even, and like those bands made it mainstream to a degree, but so did the bands before them, right? Like Iron Maiden made heavy metal mainstream too.
Right.
But these other guys commercialized it to a point of like excess, and it got kind of gross. It's like, it was fun for a little while, and it was like, oh, look at them, they're dressed up kind of different, that's cool. And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, is that chick, wait, is this band all chicks? No, they're
Right. No,
oh,
well, it's like, it's everybody either thinks that everybody is, you know, insert black metal band here, or
yeah,
like Slipknot, like
sure.
all in masks and stuff like that, or upside down crosses and Satan worshiping, cultists and stuff like that, or everybody thinks that we're Steel Panther. There's no real, like, I've never seen like an in between with like non-metal heads on what metal is.
Exactly.
It's like, and you got to explain to them that there's all this different stuff in between, and how metal is portrayed to other people is really kind of like, we're getting the short end of the stick here.
Yeah,
But at the same time, we're not really helping ourselves out by coming out and being like, no, like, we don't really have like this mass metal representative out there that's doing us any favors. You know what I mean?
exactly, you're right. And that's one of the things too, is then you get into like the whole like Satanism, like burn your records and stuff from the 90s or whatever was going on there. And then you have
If you
bands
play this record backwards, it's,
exactly. So that went into the mainstream mind, and so did this glam thing, because it was really popularized. It was like, oh, that's scary. It's metal's really extreme. And then there's bands that kept getting heavier. Like, they're just like, no, we have to be heavier than the last band. We have to be faster and heavier and grittier and, more evil. And we need to have
Right.
like
more fire.
yeah, we need to have like, like Cannibal Corpse covers and stuff. Like it has to be really extreme. And it's like, okay, yeah, like I get the value in those bands. I understand where they came from and I get why people like them within the genre. I get where that all came from. But the mainstream only sees the extremes and they only ever will. That's just how people work. They see
Right.
something and they see the extremes. Like for me, if I look at country, I go, they talk about their truck, they talk about their dog, and they talk about their wife leaving them. Whatever. That's literally my entire perception of what
And if
country is.
you play all those records back, dude, you get everything back.
Yeah, exactly. And and to me, that's all I see when I think about country. Now, is that all that country is? I don't actually know. Maybe there's more. I don't know. But you know
You
that
left out all the beer drinking.
yeah, sure. Okay. So, but my point is though is like, I'm going to generalize a genre that I don't really care about and I'm going to say this is what it is. And
Right.
I might even be pretty correct. I don't really know. But the point is that's what they do with metal too. But metal is like we were saying earlier, it's so diverse that you can't actually do that. You can't pinpoint what metal is. And then you have bands like us who go around telling people, no, you're gonna like it. I promise you.
Right.
We don't scream, we don't do this. And then they're just like, wait, really? They're yeah, do you know the Scorpions? And they're like, yeah, I love the Scorpions. And I'm just like, okay, so come to the show. And they're like, you really? You think
And
so?
that's another thing where it's just like that's cool, but it's also just like kind of sad that you got to be like, do you know the Scorpion? It's like
Yeah,
no, it's like come to our show. Like just come
yeah,
to our show. Come hear our
right.
sound.
Well,
Don't be like, hey, do you like I don't know. It's like, hey, do you know Iron Maiden? Yes. All right, come to our show. Oh,
totally.
okay. Like I'm just
Right,
like that's cool, but like you're kind of like telling somebody it's like, hey, like here's this band that you like.
right,
Now this is what we sound like when it's like sort of, but you
right.
have your own sound, you know?
Exactly. And I don't disagree, but it's that whole battle that we've had to do where people don't even think that that's possible. They're
Right.
like, well, there's no way that there's a band like that doing this. And we're just like, okay, look, do you like this band? Just if you do, you'll probably like this too. Obviously that doesn't go for everyone. I get that. Not everybody's going to like my voice. Not everyone's going to like how we approach music. But if you're into this old school Dio, Saxon, Priest, Savatage, whatever, if you're into that thing, there's a chance you're going to appreciate something we've put out. Probably.
Right.
Maybe not entirely, but you're probably going to at least get it. Not everybody likes Queensryche, but if you do, you might like us too. Um, and but one of the other things that we had to battle too was, this other notion of not just what heavy metal is, but it's also what is a local band or just even an unsigned band.
Right.
Like I
What do they
understand.
sound like? A
Obviously,
lot of people are like, all right, here's my kid at his talent show, and this is what a local band sounds like. Everybody has this idea, so it's like, okay, we'll
and
go, dude.
and I know that we're not necessarily a local band anymore. I get that. Like, we tour, we go to Europe, we've been to Brazil and the States and Mexico and whatever. But the thing is though, is we're still battling this local band mentality because
Right.
every time we go to a show, you see that like sometimes there's fantastic turnouts, but sometimes there aren't. And when you go to those shows where there aren't, all you can think in your head is they haven't seen any good local bands here. They have no like they don't even think that there's a concept of going to a show is going to be a fun time, because when they think about a local band, they're thinking about like the early 2000s, the late 90s, whatever, and they're pinpointing this like indie independent, like underground band that kind of just sucks.
Right.
That's
Here's
what
this
happening.
here's this guy with his dream tambourine up on the stage, and I got to pretend like I like it here and spend $7 for a beer, or I can spend $60 and go see Metallica. Like,
Exactly. And this is what I think a lot of people, so we're not just battling um, you know, like I mean, and this doesn't go for every metal band, obviously, because
no, obviously.
some metal bands, it's like, no, we are extreme and that's what we want. And so they're not battling that aspect of it because people get what they're doing and they're going to come out because of their logo and whatever, and that makes sense to them. But with us, we're battling the fact that heavy metal can be looked at very extreme when we're actually marketing to, in a sense, a more mainstream audience.
Right.
But then you also battle this, underground unsigned band mentality of, oh, well, they're not signed, so they're probably not very good, or or they're like playing with all these local bands and at the local bar, and nobody goes there because we're just gonna see another crappy band. Like that's
Right.
and I see it, like, when you go out on the road, like, especially I find in the States, it's really prominent in the States.
I've been I mean, I'm from Jersey, but it's something like with my show that I've been battling for a very long time. It's like, I'm the point of Metal for the Masses is to champion the underground scene. It's not like, we'll have like the mainstream artists, sprinkled
Yeah.
in, just in the rotation or like in stuff that, we play when we go live. But it's like we are here to champion the underground bands. And it's not just bands from here in the States, but it's bands from everywhere.
Yeah.
Like South America, Europe, Asia, Japan, Australia, like these places that, have underground scenes. And like you're saying, metal and the mainstream are at odds with each other. They Metal has been battling stigmatisms for so fucking long, and it a lot of it came from the counterculture days where a lot of people would be like, oh, metal's really extreme, and a lot of the people who were counterculture kind of people were just like, yeah, metal is extreme, like, that's what I associate with metal, it's not mainstream. But now it's become so non-mainstream and so extreme in certain areas, that these stigmatisms have been left unchecked for so long, and nobody's come out to really be like, well, that might be a little bit of an extreme. And I think whoever said that is full of shit,
Right.
and I think whoever said that might be extreme themselves and doesn't really know what we sound like, and doesn't really,
Yeah.
hasn't really listened to a metal album once in their life, or you can put anything there.
Yeah.
Because these stigmatisms have just been left unchecked and has been able to just fester for so long, and nobody's really either cared or tried to, like you guys are doing, like any underground band is doing, out there fighting the good fight, trying to be like, hey, like, come to our show, or hey, like, we're trying to appease to people to come see us, because it let's be honest. I mean, like, we can say, like, we're against the mainstream. You can be like, you can be against the bad parts of the mainstream, but if metal does not progress, if metal is not accepted, if the stigmatisms are left unchecked, if anything, then the scene just fizzles out. It doesn't. If people stop coming to the shows, because let's be real, what happens when Metallica retires? What happens when Megadeth stops touring? What happens when Bruce Dickinson loses his voice forever and can't go around and tour, or Ozzy, finally goes back to hell or becomes a bat and flies away? Like, I don't know. Like, what happens? What happens when this happens?
Yeah. Well,
like, who do people go see?
Actually, you brought up an interesting point. Like, just even beyond what you were even saying there was, if you look at these bands are the bands that have the chance right now to help bands like us.
Right.
And they're not.
These are bands that have become, these are bands that were deemed profitable. These were bands that are, they're just at the age now where it's just like, who cares? We made it. We won. Right. We're at the end of the race. What do we got to do? Why do we got to go out and champion these why do we got to go in and put the footwork in these days? And, it's right. a lot of, and you see this even out of music. Like, I can even go to, the generation before ours, where it's just like, I don't understand why all these millennials can't afford anything. I don't understand why all these millennials don't want to go do this or don't want to do that, or can't do this and can't do that. Well, it's this endless fight of, I don't know why we should have to try to do anything. We did this all of our lives, and this, and I'm not saying that these bands need to not just sit down and not do anything. I mean, like, we're out here, we're trying to do the ground game. But
Mhm.
if nobody higher up is, and I don't mean higher up, I mean like, I don't mean like Spotify or like
Right.
some music mogul
Yeah.
in his swiggly chair with a cigar in his mouth,
Right.
all that kind of stuff. I mean like these artists that have made it
Yeah.
are not like coming in and helping out the underground scene or being like, hey, we're going to go to a local bar to
Yeah.
support local artists.
Yeah.
We're not playing, but come hang out with us as we
Right.
go see these artists play. Like, and it doesn't even have to be like an organized thing. It can just be like, hey, like, we're here
Yeah.
checking out these bands. Come, like, and they would even come just to maybe see those
Totally.
artists, but they would also be exposed to these other underground artists.
Totally.
That's
Yeah.
and it's just little things like that. It doesn't have to be this big, like, money involved,
Right.
contract signing deal or anything. It can just be like, hey, we were at a bar and we heard this band, we posted up on our social media and all these people see it. Go follow these guys. They were really cool.
Yeah.
Just that. That's that. Just
Totally.
that. That's the
Yeah.
scene helping itself, but you
Totally.
don't see that.
Yeah, I've seen it a little bit within the actual underground scene, but none of the bigger bands have been doing that. And it's really funny because if you look at it, and this isn't entire, like, it doesn't go for every band, but if you go back to the 70s and 80s, who was a huge like help for most of these bands that we're talking about? Gene Simmons. You know what I mean? He went around and he found bands and he put them on tour with Kiss.
Yeah.
And he took them from an underground, you could even say theater level band like Rush or something. And he's like, let's go on the road. We're going to play stadiums. And they went on the road with Kiss. And then guess what? Somebody else comes by and goes, hey, that was really cool when you did that thing with Kiss. Why don't you open up for us now? Now they're
Right.
touring with Aerosmith, you know, and that happened with Van Halen. That happened with Iron Maiden. That happened with, like it goes on and on. There's tons of bands that this happened to. And Gene Simmons was behind helping a lot of these bands. He would find them and he'd help them. He's not really doing that anymore. And the thing is that's fine, but who is? And I like nobody's taking that role and helping us rebuild something fresh so that when these bands do eventually retire, which we thought was going to happen a long time ago, but they came back.
Right.
But when this actually happens and they retire and they stop putting out albums and they stop touring,
who's the next? Who's there to take the reins? Like who's
exactly.
there
And
to
then
fill the
we're
shoot?
we're just going to have this void of, a few people know about some underground bands like Enforcer or whatever, and it's cool, but you know like that's not arena. We're not playing arenas. It's not 20,000 people.
One big stigmatism that I hear a lot from not just from like older people, but just from like, even people, my age, your age, it is there's never going to be another insert artist name here.
Right.
That's something that I hate when
Yeah.
people say, because it's like, of course there's not going to be another, like, if you want to say Metallica or Iron Maiden,
Sure.
of course there's not going to be.
Yeah.
Like there shouldn't,
Yeah.
like there shouldn't be like a carbon copy. Here's the new
Exactly.
generation Metallica. It's like, no,
Yeah.
like there's so many people that look at this, then I believe look at it wrong. And it's not how it's supposed to work. You're not supposed to get a rinse and repeat same thing for however many years that they want to do this until they retire next. It's
Yeah,
like, no,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like the whole purpose of this that I feel so many people, even these big artists, miss is if you're not, sowing the seeds of the next generation of metal, then there's not going to be a next generation of metal, or it's going to be harder for these bands to get to this level because they're not receiving this kind of help. And it's also like the bands right now are growing in the shade of much larger, they imagine these bands as little tiny baby trees, and they're growing in the shade of these much larger trees. So it is like a battle of survival, like a nature kind of thing. The bigger tree is going to get the most sunlight, and it's going to be harder for the little tree to grow in that bigger tree's shadow.
Exactly.
But, you can look at it like that in a realistic nature point of view, but you can also look at it as, well, you know what? If the if somebody doesn't come along, kind of like, trim the hedges of that larger tree,
Yeah.
so, maybe the little tree can get a little bit of sunlight in there as well.
Yeah.
Now you have that next tree to take the place of this tree when that tree eventually,
Passes
dies
away.
off, falls over,
Yeah.
whatever, what have you.
Yeah.
That's and if you want to apply that to metal, it's like, look, if you want to look at these big bands that have made it, that have been around for 20, 30, 40 years, and you want to say, all right, these guys are like 60 years old now.
Mhm.
Like not a lot of time left. Like, not everybody's the Rolling Stones and is going to be a bajillion years old still going on tour. It's
Yeah.
not going to happen. Like, not every one of them is going to be this way. So what do we do when these guys retire? Is it going to be this mass, like, holy shit, we don't have anybody, we got to go and we got to scramble around, we got to find bands now? It's like, no, they could be doing this now.
Mhm.
So it's like you said, like when Gene Simmons used to go around and do this kind of stuff, you wish that there would be more people going around and doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
There isn't. And that's why we're kind of here where we are right now. The mainstream is not supporting us. So
Right.
we need to, one, we're doing all that we can and more to try to support the scene, to try to lift ourselves up, to try to do what it is that we need to do. But we can't just be left here to our own devices to do this. Not everybody's going to be able to reach this level. And I think the future of the scene is, you're never going to see bands reach that height, at least not now. You're not going to see these multi-million
Right.
billion-dollar bands like you do, like
Right.
Metallica or Iron Maiden or Slayer or these kind of things.
Right.
You're not going to see that. It's going to be a different caliber in the
Right.
future.
It's probably going to be like theater style, maybe like, maybe 1,000 people, maybe two.
like that. Like, I don't think you're going to see the industry be the way that it's been. I think you're even going to see, I think you're going to see like more of a return to art, kind of like you're saying, like more theater style kind of. You're going to see more of like a return to art style kind of music. It's not going to be a lot of bands sounding like each other. It's going to be a lot more of like, there's going to be some bands really just kind of, they're going to not sound like anybody else kind of style. I'm hoping that we return to that, because that's also a big thing that's kind of like over polluting the scene as well. You do have a lot of bands that kind of do sound like each other these days. And I think that is a lot to do with, there's a lot of stagnation in the scene. I think there's a lot of, not just stagnation, but there's too much that people are trying to do, and I think that I think a lot of artists try to overcompensate. I think a lot of artists say they're inspired by certain bands, but in reality, they just mimic certain bands.
Yeah.
And I just think that until metal kind of like figures this kind of stuff out, and much like, we were saying earlier, until, the other artists start getting into that, oh shit, like we're going to retire soon, what have we done to help the scene kind of moment.
Right.
What are, like, we're kind of just here helping ourselves.
Yeah. To be completely honest with you, I'm not even sure if it's crossing their minds.
Yeah, I don't know either. That's a good point. It might not eat. That's another thing. Even is crossing their minds. It's a good point. And you know what? I think that just goes to, I think that speaks more to like a personal, like a more human kind of level, more than like an artist kind of level. I think that speaks more on like a human psyche kind of thing. We're not really quick to think of, how we've helped others and the broader scene. That does kind of come at like the end. A lot of people have a, how have I impacted, that kind of thing, but that comes like, that's like deathbed.
Yeah, it's
kind of way too late kind of stuff. Like, very rarely do you see that happen while they're still up and about. But it's very rare that you see that kind of stuff cross, the human psyche's mind. It very does get very about yourself kind of thing.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting too, because like, I mean, just one last note on it. was it's like Iron Maiden, for example, like they'll tour with bands that are cool sometimes, like Dream Theater or Trivium or somebody, and it's like, okay, cool, but like those bands, like I'm sure it helps those bands a bit, I'm sure it does, but it's like, so just throw another band before them, like don't even pay them, they'll do it, like I swear.
My favorite, they will. My favorite was it was a little bit ago, but when they toured with the Raven Age, and the Raven Age is like, it's like their son's band.
Yeah, I know.
It's kind of just like, well, okay. Was there anybody else you could have thrown on there too? Like I get like, oh, my son's in a band, I'm gonna help his band out, bring him on tour with Iron Maiden. A lot of people are gonna be exposed to it. Raven Age is a good band, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, you kind of look at that and be like, really? Like there was it, like, okay, like how did, for them to say anything else after that, it's like, huh, like, how do you guys think that you got famous? You know what I mean? Like back at it, how do you guys think that you got, exposed? And for them to say anything else than, my dad took us on tour, with his band Iron Maiden, like, is gonna be like, they're gonna be full of shit. Like it's gonna be one of those kind of deals.
Yeah.
But it's not everybody's dad is Iron Maiden. Not everybody's dad is Metallica. Not everybody's dad is, Ozzy Osbourne, God help you. But it's just, all throughout your life, Sharon, but
yeah,
all the memes,
yeah.
but no, like not everybody's dad is somebody, not everybody's, related to somebody famous who can take them on tour with them. And that's the thing. It's what do you do?
Yeah, exactly. So it's an issue, and I don't know if there's ever going to be much of a solution in that regard, but it's something that I think we've all thought a little bit about, at least, and
it's something that at the end of the day, I think, the scene just needs to go on and support itself. We need to stop trying to get support from other people. We need to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, and we need to be like, hey, like, look, this is the metal scene. This is what it is. We're not Steel Panther. We're not, these scary satanic worshiper. I mean, some of us are, but that's not all of us. We're not these scary, on fire satanic worshipers that talk in growly noises that sound like the Cookie Monster. Like, that's the extreme. This is the making jokes. It's like, no, this is what the metal scene is. And I think a lot more bands need to come out and be like, this is what metal is.
Yeah.
You can either like us or not like us. But this is what we are. This is, how it needs to be. We need to stop trying to appease the mainstream more than anything, because I think there's a lot of bands that try to present themselves in a way that is that is marketable, that is profitable, that is something like this. And once they get there, they lose that thing that they had when they weren't signed, or when they were independent, or when they were this. And a lot more bands need to keep that, that feeling they had when they were independent, when they were just starting out. That's something that I feel a lot of bands lose.
Yeah, well, and here's a cool thing too, actually, like with Iron Kingdom specifically, we've been at it, like you said, for a while. It's been like 11 years or something. And, whatever success you could say we've had, it's very small at, there's times where it's like, we'll have a little height in success, and then it'll just kind of, whatever. If a band like us were to ever get bigger, to the point where it's like we're actually, say, living off the music or whatever, do you think there's going to be an ego behind that? I don't. I
don't know, man. It's like, this is now, that's then. Is there going to be an ego behind it? I don't know, man. But it's just like, I think it's also all about the person. If you're the kind of person where, like, if you're the kind of person where you don't really have too much of an ego now, like you're not living off of like we've put out 5 albums, and it's this, and look how great we are kind of thing. And I haven't gotten that from you this entire interview. I mean, like at one point in the interview, you were like, you were super bummed out about having to be the lead vocalist, about having to be the face of the band. And it's just like, I've never heard anybody anybody be sad about the fact that they had to be the guy up front. You know, it's like I've never heard that.
I mean,
Usually
that
you
was at
have
first.
people,
That was
right?
at first, and then I
At
did get
first,
to enjoy it, but
right? But
but
like at first, I mean, like that level of humble is like, you know, that there's no ego behind that. You know, there's no ego behind something like that at all. Because then you have like the opposite end of that, where like some people are like, who wants to be the front man? And you have, you know, the whole band splits up because there is this big fight about who's better at being a front man than who. And
yeah,
we don't even put out a first album because, you know,
yeah,
Jack and Jerry couldn't figure out you know, had the best hair to be the front man, you know?
Jerry.
I don't know. Fucking, I don't know. Just
I'm-
throwing names out there,
yeah, yeah,
but no, that is, you know,
yeah.
the future's not really something that is set in stone. I mean, like, who knows what the scene will be like in just a couple of years?
You
But
know,
like, you know,
there could be a new platform that comes out, and all of a sudden, bands are making money again. Who knows?
right.
I don't know. It's unlikely, but I don't know.
Well, you know what? I'm one here hoping that Spotify burns to the ground. I think Spotify takes way too much advantage of artists and gives them nothing in return.
Mhm.
So I mean, like, there's hoping, but you know what? I hope more bands come out that are of not just the caliber of Iron Kingdom, but are of the viewpoint of you, sir. Because if more bands came out and we're not of the mindset of we're out here to try to get famous or to try to go and sell as many albums as we can, or go out and live off the music, or to become the next Metallica, or to become the next, you know, Cannibal Corpse, or become the next whatever, you know, that's a big thing that I try to get across to even the younger generation of metalheads is like, look, like, if you're going to get into this, you know, this isn't, you know, going to be the most profitable decision of your life. You know, this is going to be the least profitable decision of your life. You know, you're either in this all the way.
Yeah.
You're either in this all the way, or you're in this for like 3 months until you realize, holy shit, like, this is a lot harder than we thought, and I'm spending a lot more money than I thought I was, you know.
Yeah,
And it's
exactly.
one of those kind of things. And I think if the scene kind of gets cleaned up that way, if we battle the stigmatisms, if we, even a lot of people say, like, when I was just talking about Spotify, I've talked to plenty of artists that are like, you know, yeah, I mean, Spotify sucks, but it's a platform that, like, you know, it helps us get our stuff out there. So we just have to, it's like, no, you don't. Just say no. Just say fuck Spotify, leave Spotify. And I'm sure if everybody just did that, you know, what are they going to do? They'll change their tune real fucking fast. Like, you know, there's so much power that an individual has that can start. It's like a boulder rolling down a mountain. You know, it's once it starts slow rolling, I mean, like, one or two bands might do it, and then other people might see that those bands have called it quits with, you know, being, you know, with all the shit that they're dealing with in the scene, or shit that they're dealing with entities like Spotify, or the shit that's going on in the scene. You know, once just a couple bands start fighting back against that kind of stuff, you'll see more and
Yeah.
more and more and more bands fight against that kind of stuff, until finally, like, you know, people will start listening, you know, and the metal scene will be better off than it was
Right.
10
Well,
years ago.
I mean, I do have one thought on that, because, like, with Spotify specifically, Iron Kingdom is in a weird spot.
Okay.
Because Iron Kingdom is a band, like, I'm literally today, I'm spending my entire day, other than this interview, just packaging CDs and
Right.
cassettes to go out to people. And the thing is like, I think we're one of the bands, like, there's a number of bands that do this now, but I think we're one of those bands that appeal to people who like physical products.
Absolutely.
And they want the vinyl on their wall. They want the CD. Yeah, maybe they'll listen on Spotify just to find out if they're into it or not. But then, you know, if they really like it, they're wearing our shirt and they have our CD and whatever. And I think we're one of the exceptions to the rule, because we play this kind of old school metal. Like, that people have this old school mentality that goes with it, and they're like, yeah, I'm gonna buy your cassette because that's awesome, you know.
There is nothing uh more rewarding than playing a vinyl. That having a vinyl, just in like just having a vinyl, even if you don't have a record player, just go out, buy vinyl,
Yeah.
collecting vinyl, and just being like, look at how this used to be. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not just like, here's everything that's digital and all you have is like, I have my phone in my hand and headphones in, and that's what I'm listening to. I have this vast collection on my, iTunes, but that's it. Like with vinyl or cassette, right? With everything right there, with vinyl or cassette or CDs or what have, like, you have something physical. It's an actual collection you can see and hold in your hand, and then bring other people to be like, look at this, look at all my stuff, isn't it neat? Wouldn't you say my collection's complete?
But
But
like heavy metal, or I don't know as much about like some of the heavier genres
right.
specifically. I'm not sure what the mentality is there, but I know at least with like just heavy metal, or traditional heavy metal, or whatever you want to call it, there's a big demand for physical products.
Absolutely.
And I think like it's not that Spotify isn't taking from that, and it's not that iTunes isn't taking from that or whatever, but I think if they're really into it, they're gonna get that physical product, or they're at least gonna come out to see us live or something. And I think there's a point where it ends up working out, but again, it's hard for me to speak in terms of like, I don't know, say you're a pop artist, like, dude, I can't imagine you're selling a CD. Like,
No.
there's no way.
There's
Maybe.
also there's really just also the biggest the biggest problem of, like, the modern age. It's, you can just see, you don't have to go see anybody live. There's it even the problem with COVID now, that is, and I think even the next Ozfest is all digital.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to sit and watch it at your house. You don't have to go anywhere. Like,
Yeah.
it's just,
Yeah.
what?
Well, this is actually why we put out that little documentary, and there's actually going to be a part 2 coming out later as well. Yeah. It's the whole idea of like, well, you know what? There's a good chance they're only going to find out about us by checking us out online. And if they delve into it a little bit more and they get a little bit more backstory and stuff like that, maybe that's when they turn into a real fan. It's like they get to know a little bit about us as people, not just as the song or a band or whatever, as an album.
Right.
And that's a mentality that Iron Maiden had back in the day too. It was like, you kind of get to know them as people just as much as they showed you their music. They put out documentaries, and they let you in a way that other bands didn't. And
you get to know that Bruce Dickinson is also a pilot, and it's just like, wow.
Yeah. It's cool stuff. And and I think it gets you on a more personal level to appreciate what this is as a full entity kind of thing. And I don't know. So it's interesting. So it was just like a little thing where like, hey, let's just do that because, that's, if I wanted to be, if I was a fan of this band, I would do that. I would want to see that,
Absolutely. Well, sir, it's just been a wonderful interview. I really just want to thank you again for agreeing to do this, for taking time out of your day. I don't want to take any more time of it. So, Mr. Osterman, if there is anything, that you want to add to this interview, that, tell us when we can expect the Blood of Creation to be released.
Yeah.
And anything else you want to add to this, man, feel free.
Yeah.
The stage is yours.
Well, thank you so much for having me and for supporting the band.
Absolutely.
In your way. I really appreciate it. And for the review as well. It was fantastic. I loved reading it. So The Blood of Creation is coming out November 4th. It's just around the corner. I believe it's less than a week from now. We've been rehearsing like mad for our release party, which I don't know if there's any Vancouverites listening in on this, but we're playing November 4th at the Wise Hall, and I think we're getting near 75% sold out. So we're pretty stoked. And, so there's that. We're mailing out pre-orders already. So, if you make a pre-order, it's essentially just an order now. We have a website, www.iron-kingdom.com. And on there, you can see lyrics, you can see discography. There's biographies, including personal biographies from each band member. We have all the reviews and interviews linked on the site. You can find tons of stuff on there. It's our site. It's always going to be there. That's, it's not like Facebook or Instagram where it's popular at one point and then it disappears. We're always going to have this site. So if you follow us there, you can find us on everything else. Just thank you so much for listening in. And if you haven't heard of us before, check out some of the new stuff and hope you enjoy what you hear.
Chris Osterman of Iron Kingdom, everybody. You've been listening to Metal for the Masses on live365.com.